Well, it concerns me greatly that they're having one-on-one or close to one-on-one meetings. Steve Witkoff needs, whether or not he believes that himself, to have the knowledge and experience of those who have had to deal with Vladimir Putin over the decades across Republican and Democratic administrations. And he appears to be operating without that. And the statements he's made publicly are deeply concerning that he made prior to this meeting about how he viewed Vladimir Putin. And you can be sure that Putin very clearly has Witkoff's number, literally, probably, in terms of what we know about the lack of security and operational security of this administration, but also just in terms of his profile and what it's going to take to essentially get the better of him. So it concerns me deeply.
Well, Bloomberg reported yesterday, Mara, that part of what Witkoff was going to present to Putin today were things that the U.S. would like Russia to agree to in a deal, including accepting Ukraine have its own military and defense industry. But Kurt Volker, who worked on Ukraine negotiations during the first Trump administration, was with us on Balance of Power last night. And he said the suggestion that this is a concession from Russia, which is the invading country here, is a mischaracterization of it, that no such concessions can really exist. And I wonder if you think about that in the same way, or do you think the U.S. is asking Russia to swallow something that it might not be willing to otherwise if it wasn't the Trump administration negotiating?
No, I agree very much with what Kurt Volker said. And I would just point to Kurt as the kind of expert that Steve Witkoff and the administration would benefit from hearing from, listening to, in terms of the depth and breadth of his experience with these actors. And so that is one of the many things that concerns me. I think it is obviously critical for Ukraine to keep its military ability, but the idea that that's a major concession that the United States is proposing to Russia is just another indication, I think, of the imbalance with which the United States is dealing with Russia and Ukraine in trying to resolve this.
Mara, how do you read this back and forth over China right now? President Trump suggesting daily communication between the two sides. He says President Xi has called him. Beijing says none of that is true. What should we take from that?
I think we can take that neither actor who's making these proclamations would be the place I'd go to for truth telling at any point. So it's tough to know or understand what discussions have actually occurred.
So you don't find that the administration and the White House is more creditworthy, more truthful than the regime in Beijing?
Sadly, I do not.
I guess that really answers the question about how you read into this. Do you think that there will be a meeting between President Trump and Xi?
I would not be surprised if there was. And I also don't know if there have been conversations between them or not. Clearly, China is very comfortable putting out that there have been no trade negotiations. And President Trump, we know, is sometimes very loose, I can say charitably, with his characterizations of conversations or the content thereof. President Trump also said, I believe yesterday, that he has agreements with 200 different trade agreements, and he's 100% certain on that. And that's a somewhat baffling statement to make, given that I believe there are 90 sets of negotiations ongoing or contemplated at this point. So reliability of information is a huge challenge right now on extraordinarily sensitive issues that go to our economic and national security.
Well, I'd like to ask you about another one of those sensitive issues or areas, because the president was just speaking with reporters on Air Force One, Mara, and answered some questions about Iran specifically. He said the Iran situation is coming out very well, that he'd rather have a deal with Iran than the alternative. And he says the deal is very simple. They can't have a nuclear weapon. Are you optimistic that there can be an actual deal inked with Iran? And how close could it look to the original deal from the Obama administration?
Yeah. So President Trump has a history of denigrating agreements and then making new agreements that very much resemble them. See NAFTA, and then the subsequent agreement with Canada and Mexico, and the JCPOA agreement between Iran and Europeans and the United States would be another example of that. I will say here, I think there are several avenues that point to potential promising outcomes in terms of these negotiations. And by promising outcomes, I mean getting a better handle again on Iran's nuclear activity and forestalling military action against Iran. I think that's what the Saudis want. That's what other key players in the region with whom President Trump is working closely are looking toward. And I think the question will be, again, the skill of the negotiators on both sides. And here again, I'm concerned about the leading role that Steve Witkoff has.
We've only got a minute left, Mara. 50 heads of state will gather in Rome in the next 24 hours for the Pope's funeral. President Trump will be there. He and the First Lady will essentially be leaving as soon as it's done, which means likely no meeting with President Zelensky. Is that a missed opportunity?
I think there are there are so many opportunities that have been missed by President Trump. I will say that I think it's important in terms of him going to the funeral of the Pope to honor the memory of Pope Francis and to focus on that. So I'm a little concerned about the amount that he has been talking about opportunities for various side meetings because it's a solemn moment and it's an important moment to honor the memory of a man who really has had a tremendous impact and has a tremendous legacy for the world to respect.